Hey everyone, welcome back to Watch and Carry. So in today's video, we're going to be covering wheel wobble. So wheel wobble, whether or not you've experienced it or not, it's kind of like when you're riding your board, and usually it happens either when you're going close to the top speed or you're carving, when all of a sudden you'll notice that the board starts to wobble left, right pretty rapidly, and in many cases, the rider falls down. So for me, I kind of wanted to understand why this is happening exactly. And I'm not going to claim that this is scientifically proven or that this is the exact cause, but I've done some studies on anatomy in PA school. I'm by no means an expert or a foot surgeon, but we did cover some basics in PA school about, center of mass in the foot, the different types of skeletons that are located in the foot itself. And knowing that information, I think kind of helped me to come to some general principles about what might be causing my personal foot wobble, which I had up until a day ago, and what I've kind of done to correct that. So I like to kind of start with a little bit of very basic anatomy. So go ahead and just ignore all these labels here on the top picture and just focus on the labels that I've written down here in these three other pictures here. So just to give you some frame of reference and orientation, in the top picture, we have what looks like a lady, and you are looking at the bottom of the soles of her 2 feet. So I want you to go ahead and just picture the bottom of her left foot, and now we're going to focus on the bottom picture here to kind of explain what's happening with wheel wobble. So in the foot, what we've kind of learned at school is there are, of course, many bones in the foot, but there are two types of functional units that are made up by those bones. And by functional units, I mean two types of mechanisms that provide two different purposes for the foot. So you have this part in like a tan color, which is considered the propulsory part of the foot. By propulsory, kind of like propulsion, it's kind of what moves you forward, like when you're running, when you're jogging, when you're stepping on your tippy toes to reach something on, at a very high level. And then you also have this other part here on the right side, the receptive foot. And the receptive foot is kind of for, taking your weight, um, taking the force of impact when you're either walking or jumping and you land on the ground, and distributing that force throughout the rest of your skeleton, your upper skeleton. So that way it kind of minimizes the pressure and the force that's done just to your foot. Again, not a foot expert, so I'm sure there are other people who know more than me on this, but this is just the basics from what I've gathered. And then between these two functional units of the foot, you have this center of mass. Now, this is assuming a person with a quote unquote ideal foot or anatomically perfect foot. Everybody's foot's going to be a little bit different. For example, you have people that are a little bit more flat footed. So let's just assume that this is an anatomically correct foot. Okay. So between these two functional units, you have this point at the bottom of the sole where it's considered your COM, or center of mass. Another word for that is, or another term for that is center of gravity. Okay. And you can see that it's kind of located right at the base of the fourth and the fifth digit here. Okay. So if we go back to our woman who's doing yoga here, you can see, let me zoom out, that if it's right here on the skeleton, it would probably be around right here on her foot. So how do you locate that on your own feet? Well, if you look here, you can kind of follow that there are, let me grab a pointer here. Here is the heel of your foot, and then there's a curvature, like a concave turn in your foot here, and then a convex turn here. Concave and then convex again. So when you are feeling your own feet, the best way I think to locate that is to go to your left foot or your right foot, go to the outermost side, so the most lateral side of that foot, and then look for that curve in your foot here, and look for that first kind of bump, that convex turn on the lateral side of your foot. And then just go like an inch or two to the inside of the foot, kind of at the base of your fourth toe, and you can put your finger there. Okay. I'm going to explain why it's important to know where that is later. So once you're able to kind of locate your own center of mass point, let's go now to the OneWheel Pint board and kind of explain how we are going to apply that knowledge. So this is my OneWheel Pint, and I've kind of labeled it here. You have the front, you have the rear, and then of course the left, and you have the right side here. So let's start with her left foot here, which is this foot here. What you're going to do with your left foot is put the whole entire foot, for me at least, this is what works. I put that whole entire foot a little bit closer to the wheel. So for example, this foot could have been placed more to the top. It could have been placed in the middle, but I place mine more towards the rear, towards the tire. And then you can see here, I kind of do an alpine stance where I kind of turn the orientation of my left foot a little bit to the front of the board. So if this is like 0 degrees here, I almost turn it about 45 degrees, a little bit less than 45 degrees. Okay. And then I've marked here in blue tape the dividing point between the left and right side of the front foot pad. And what I like to do is my center of mass on my left foot, I like to put it exactly in line with that dividing line. Okay. And then let's go to the rear foot. Now the rear foot, let's start with positioning. You can see here that I put the entire foot more towards the back of the board, not to the front, not in the middle, but more towards the back of the board. For me, putting that in the back provides a little bit more stability. In my experience, the more you move this foot closer to the tire, the easier it is to carve and turn, but the more wheel wobble you tend to get by moving it forward, and the less wheel wobble you get by moving it backward. Okay, so in here, again, I put it to the rear, and again, I've angled my foot a little bit to the front of the board. So if this is 0 degrees, this is about maybe 15 or 20 degrees angled this way. Okay, and again, you can see that center of mass here. I've put it again on this blue tape, which divides the left from the right side of the board. So in both cases, my center of mass shown by those yellow dots is always in line with the middle of the board. And for me, knowing that and applying it today really changed my riding experience. I just came back from a 1-hour ride. I actually have a video of it that I will make as a part 2 to accompany this video. And man, I got to tell you, it was the first time that I felt like I could carve without the wheel wobble, and the first time that I could go max speed, 14, 15, 60 miles an hour in a straight line without having to worry about that wheel wobbling. It felt really, really great today. And this was going flat, this was going on a downhill, this was going on an uphill. It just felt perfect. Okay, so for me, that's kind of my understanding of the anatomy and how I've used it to change my stance to take out that wheel wobble. Now, in a moment, I'm going to have a pair of shoes that have orange tape to signify these two centers of mass, and I'm actually going to demo it for you on the board itself. But other things to consider with wheel wobble go beyond just your foot placement. From what I've gathered from reading from other riders online who have much more experience than me, it's also going to have to do with just your experience with riding a board type of sport and the muscles that you have developed in that area. Now, when you hit ground, the ground in general is not perfectly level. There's always going to be a little bit of wobble, whether or not you can feel it or see it. The ground is never, ever, ever going to be perfectly level. And the way that you adjust to those small imperfections in the road is not only your stance, as we've shown here, but also just how well your muscles are developed. And even if you're in the best of shape, also how well your muscles are developed to dealing with a boarded sport. So to take that into account too. Another thing to consider is the tire itself. Just like a car, just like a motorcycle, the amount of PSI, or the amount that the tire is inflated, will definitely affect wobble as well. The ideal PSI for the OneWheel Pint, at least, I'm not familiar with the XR or the Plus, is 20 PSI. And that is the ideal pressure you want to be inflated to. Now, if you are above that or below that, then most certainly you are going to be affecting your control of the board and possibly your wheel wobble. I've noticed that there was one time when I was riding with a PSI of 15. I just forgot to check my PSI before riding. I noticed a lot more wobble. And the reason I think for that was just because the tire was a little bit more deflated than usual. And so there was more tire coming into contact with the road. And if the road is already imperfect, more of those imperfections are contacting more of the tire, and hence contributing more to my wobble. So another thing to check is your PSI. Make sure that you have that ideal PSI on your tire. Other things to consider are just the, not flexibility, but almost the, how can I put this? I guess how relaxed a rider you are. If you think about your lower skeleton, your legs, your feet as a shock absorber, so to speak, or a strut in a car, you obviously don't want it to be too stiff, right? Because any imperfection in the road is going to be immediately transferred to very stiff legs and feet. And of course, if there's nothing to kind of dissipate those vibrations, it's going to channel that energy, those vibrations, into your board, and that could contribute to wobble as well. So you want to have a little bit of bend in your knees. You want to have a little bit of flexibility in your legs, and just kind of, adapt, so to speak. When the road gets a little bit bumpier, you get a little bit looser. When it gets a little bit firmer, you kind of firm up a little bit. But there's always a little bit of play in the stretch and extension of your legs. So keep that in mind. A good thing to also note, for those of you that happen to ride motorcycles, I've only ridden, a few times, so I'm not an expert. But for sure, one thing the instructor covered with us is that when motorcycles get wheel wobble, one of the worst things you can do is tense up your hands. You go to the handlebars and you're scared, so you immediately get very stiff. And what ends up happening there is, again, there's nothing to dissipate that wobble, and all of that energy from the wobble gets transmitted into the tires, and of course, the motorcycle loses balance oftentimes. So, that contributes again to being a little bit loose in your legs, a little bit bend in your knees. Be comfortable with flexing your ankle and extending your ankle depending on how you ride. It's a very fluid kind of motion. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Yeah, I think that's going to be it for now. So let's get to some practical information and move away from this stuff. So I have my shoes here that I actually used today. And you can see here that I have marked my center of mass in both of these shoes with this orange tape. Actually, this tape has moved up a little bit because I just came back from a ride. So that should be a little bit lower. So that's my center of mass for my left foot and my right foot. So now taking what we apply, let's take my left foot first. Well, let's do the right foot because that's how you're going to approach the board. Again, I take my orange tape, my center of mass, and I put that directly over this line that divides the left and right part of the rear foot pad. And I put my shoe a little bit towards the rear of the board, and then I angle it a little bit forward, a little bit alpine style, okay? And that's how I ride right there. Now, if I haven't mentioned already, I'm 6'2". I weigh 85 pounds, and my shoe size is size 11. So how much heel hangs off or how much toe hangs off will also depend on your, your body size and your foot size. Now going to the front part, again, I put this center of mass in line with that blue part of the tape, and then I move this foot a little bit closer to the tire, And then I kind of angle it a little bit like this. Again, about 0 degrees here, so about 15 to 45 degrees center like that. So now let's take a top shot and kind of show you what that looks like right there. Okay, and let me level out the board actually. Let me put this down really quick. There we go. And that's kind of my foot placement right there. So again, center of mass orange tape, center of mass orange tape. Okay, so try that out. See how that works for you. You know, I think understanding the anatomy really helps just a little bit. If anything, it just gives you something quantifiable to change. You know that, you know, okay, if this doesn't work for you how I place it, maybe move that orange a little bit to the right of the tape, or move it a little bit to the left, and then vice versa with the left foot. But at least you're giving yourself some visuals, some quantifiable data where you can kind of adjust and play around with it, so to speak. Okay, I don't know if I want to go too much longer on this, but since I'm here already, also understanding the principles of what turns the board left and right will kind of help you out as well. So just know that the more pressure you put on your heels, the more the board will go in that direction. So I'm a traditional rider, meaning my left foot is leading. So the more weight I put here on my left heel, left and right, of course, the board is going to tip to the left. Reverse of that, the more pressure I put here on my balls of my feet, okay, the more the board is going to go to the right. And so what that tells you is if you have your heels directly in line with the left side of the board, then of course, the more you stand on your heels, the easier it is going to be for that board to turn to the left. Reverse again of that, if your foot placement is more to the front and the balls of your feet are directly in line with the right side of the rail, then of course the more weight you put on those balls of your feet, the more the board is going to turn to the right side. So that is just some, good principle to understand in terms of what turns the board left and right. Other things to think about that we've mentioned earlier are foot placement. In general, for me at least, what I found is the closer my feet are towards the wheel, the much easier it is to carve left and right, but the more wheel wobble I experience at higher speeds, especially while going in a straight line. Reverse of that, the wider my stance or further away from the tire, the less wheel wobble I have, but the more difficult it is for me to turn sharp or carve sharp left and right. And of course, you can see that you have a wider stance, so of course you're going to feel more balance. So that's why for me, I kind of combine the two and do one towards the tire and one away for me, where I have that nice balance between being maneuverable with this foot and also having some balance with my right foot as well. All right, so that will do it for today's video. Please check out part 2. I'm actually on a run out here on a nice bike path outside of or inside Summerlin in Las Vegas, and I got to kind of demo these, theories that I was thinking about. And again, as I had mentioned at the beginning of the video, had an amazing ride. I think I'm going to invest in a GoPro or, one of those things where you have the long stick that holds the camera. I'm not very technically savvy, so I don't know what you call those, but hopefully I can get one of those and get some much better footage. But for me, this really, really helped. And I hope this will help you as well. Please share your experiences below. This has worked for me. It may not work for everyone. If you have a better idea of how to prevent wheel wobble, please share it below. I always feel like you have an opportunity to learn, and there are tons of people out there who have been riding for a much longer time that have some really, really great ideas. So please, share it, pass it along to the community, so that way we can get more people riding safe and having more fun on their pints or XR. So thanks again for staying tuned, guys, and I will catch you in part 2. Have a nice day.